YOLO Julius, it's your girl Raven Chapman, the Omen. Just want to give you a big shout out here from the UK. Ring IQ, you're the man. Thanks so much for your support.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Ahead of her big unification match this week, Valle aims to become a 2-division champion. Although her opponent Nguyen only has 5 pro fights, she had an extended amateur career, so Valle knows not to take her lightly. Although Valle knows what she is up against, her motivation is at an all-time high as she continues to look for unification opportunities. I don't want to just stay with my IBF title. I want them all. Nguyen, at 5 fights, was able to become a champion, which says a lot about her. She has a lot of experience, and I don't underestimate anyone. I have trained so hard to give the fans a great performance. The titles are great, but having the satisfaction of fans leaving saying, wow, Yoka was great, I want to see her again is what I aim to do. Aside from the accomplishments inside the ring, Valle prides herself in being a positive role model to the people back in Costa Rica, which has become her home away from home. When she isn't partaking in the sweet science, Valle is part of an environmental group called
Grupo Mutual.
Shifting the focus back to Thursday night, which is a huge unification fight for the minimum weight division. Valle wants to ensure fight fans leave the arena or their couch thinking, I want to see her fight again. Valle wants to leave the fight fans a message before she enters the ring, attempting to win another world title. Don't miss out on this fight on September 8th. You will see more aggressive and more technical Yoka on that night. You can't miss this fight. It's champion versus champion, and once that bell rings, you will stay for the whole fight. Again, I have trained so hard to give you all a spectacular fight. Valle has her heart and her head in the right place. As a professional fighter, a pugilist, you want to leave a lasting impression on the fans when the fight is over. Whether you win or lose, you want them to say, I want to see that fighter again. It's more or less what's going on with veteran fighter and journeyman Derek Chisoria. He's got a lot of losses in the column, but people still want to see him in the ring. Yeah, Yokasta's got the right idea. That's what you should be shooting for. She's going to be taking on 25-year-old unbeaten fighter of Vietnam, unbeaten champion, newly crowned Thi Nguyen. And while Thi Nguyen is not as experienced as a professional, she does come from a good amateur background. Upon viewing the footage of this fighter in action when she won the WBO title from then reigning champion Atsuko Tada of Japan, you can see that this is a fighter that knows their way around the ring. You can see that this is a fighter that knows what they're doing. They're put together. There's coordination, there's speed, they're snapping the punches. Looks to have some pop on them, some snap in those shots, and good movement. But it's not without some angling. Atsuko Tada was, what, 40 years old when they fought? Thi Nguyen is 15 years younger than Atsuko Tada. So there is that to consider. She won't be facing a 40-year-old fighter this Thursday. She'll be facing Valle. Yokasta sports a professional record of 25 wins, 2 losses, no draws with 9 knockouts, having never been stopped. A spirited fighter that's looking to go out there and make an impression, leave one. She's 5 years older than Thi Nguyen, 30 years old. Certainly not the oldest fighter. Far from it. She ain't so old you need to worry about Father Time catching up to her in this fight. I do feel like experience will make all the difference here. Experience mid-range to inside, experience in the pocket. Like I said, you can see that Nguyen knows her way around the ring, and she knows what she's doing. But since having won that belt, she hasn't even defended it. In fact, it's been approximately 11 months since she had a fight, close to a year. So you're talking about a fighter who's not all that experienced in the professional ranks, hasn't fought this caliber of fighter very often, if at all. I mean, she did fight Atsuko Tada, but Atsuko Tada was an aging fighter, an aging champion. It's just one fighter. The other 4 girls she fought were journeywomen. That's not saying that Valle hasn't fought her own fair share of journeywomen over the years, but she has also shared the ring with Tina Hruprecht. Yeah. She has also shared the ring with 4-division champion of Japan, Naoko Fujioka. Yeah. I know that those are fights that she lost, but those are also experiences she has to draw from that Nguyen doesn't. Sometimes you can learn more from a defeat than you can from a victory. As stated, Nguyen hasn't fought in the last 11 months, whereas Valle, not only was she active last year, she was active this year. She fought 2 times already this year. She had a rematch with Japan's own Sana Hazuki in March. More recently, she made her Golden Boy Promotions debut in June against Lorraine Villalobos. A spirited performance from the reigning defending champion. And I expect to see an even more spirited performance this Thursday against Thithuthi Nguyen. Best way to describe Valle in action is a good, solid, and balanced fighter. Good set of legs under her, shows some movement, shows some in and out game, good mid-range to inside when she's letting the fists fly. Her variety of punches is sometimes limited and monotonous. Yeah, it does get repetitive after a while, but she's alright in the pocket. Vastly more experienced than Nguyen, and having home field advantage, this fight taking place in Yocosta's neck of the woods, also being the house fighter, I like Valle to win on points in what promises to be an entertaining fight. Even though Thithuthi Nguyen shows promise and she comes from a good amateur background, I'm banking on Yocosta. I'm banking on Yocosta being a little better at every turn than the newly crowned champion Thithuthi Nguyen of Vietnam. I think experience will be the determining factor here. Men's heavyweight news per tweet from Michael Benson. Tony Bellew on Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. AJ is the biggest draw. If you're going to be reasonable and say 50-50, it'd be crazy not to take it. But at 60-40, I would be hesitant because you bring an awful lot to the table, probably more than the champion himself. Some people feel it's Tyson Fury that's being generous here. It's an act of generosity, him extending Anthony Joshua this opportunity coming off of 2 consecutive losses, allowing him to fight for a title at a 60-40 split, no less. But I don't think it's generosity. I think it's opportunism, because Anthony Joshua can't be riding high. Why would he be? He just dropped 2 decisions to the same guy. This isn't an act of generosity. It's Tyson Fury trying to corner a fight with a wounded animal. Playing on Anthony Joshua's pride as a fighter, not wanting to shy away from a challenge, and playing on the audience's bloodlust, their bloodthirst. This conversation has already gained a lot of traction. It's not generosity. It is plain old opportunism for financial gain. As Tyson Fury himself stated in plain English, he still sees the value in a Joshua fight. Is it customary to give a guy coming off 2 consecutive losses 40% of the pot? A beltless fighter who's coming off of 2 consecutive losses, is that customary to give a fighter under those circumstances 40% of the overall pot? No, it isn't. When Tyson Fury fought Dillian Whyte, Dillian only got 25% of the pot. And he was coming off a win. Anthony Joshua was coming off a loss, and he's set to make more than Dillian. Why is that? Because he brings more value to the table than Dillian. He brings more value to the table than really any other fighter in the heavyweight division. If he didn't, Tyson Fury wouldn't be, quote-unquote, offering him 40% of the pot. But he is, isn't he? And it's obvious why. It's the strangest thing. Are we really going to see this fight materialize, come into fruition before this year is out? Fight Hub's Marcos Villegas tweeted, just finished speaking to Eddie Hearn, confirmed that he did receive terms from Fury Warren for the Fury versus Joshua fight. 60-40 split for December 17th at the Millennium Stadium with a rematch clause. Eddie told me, we accept, but noted Fury Warren offered November 12th as the date for the fight. Now, when Fury uploaded that video to his social media, he himself made no mention of November. December is what he said. December was the proposed month for the match. They sent for November 12th, 60-40 split. Eddie responded with accepting 60-40 on AJ's behalf, but said AJ would not be ready until December 17th. Said Warren had December 17th already saved and held. Well, if Frank Warren already had it saved, then there shouldn't be a problem, right? One would think. But Tyson Fury has now declared that he's not happy with Anthony Joshua's request for their fight to take place on December 17th. Fury replied in an Instagram comment, November 26th at Wembley or December 3rd in Cardiff. That's the dates. Take it or leave it. This ain't just a big fight domestically. This is a big fight overall, a very big fight. One of the biggest fights you can hope to make in the entire sport. Why should Tyson Fury himself be so hung up on dates? He's basically fighting a wounded animal, a guy who's coming off of 2 consecutive losses. Even Tyson Fury himself acknowledged that going into this fight, Anthony Joshua would be a massive underdog with the bookies. He'd be the favorite to win. If he's willing to fight Anthony Joshua on December 3rd in Cardiff, why should December 17th be any different? It's the same month. It's a little over a week, maybe 2. You're still catching this guy at a very opportune time, so what difference does it make to you? You're the Gypsy King, ain't you? It's a wonder that the Anthony Joshua people are even entertaining this offer, entertaining this fight, when it's most inopportune for them. If they turned it down, I wouldn't hold it against him, but he hasn't turned it down. When Andy Ruiz lost that decision to Anthony Joshua in the rematch, he didn't jump right back in there with a killer. He took his time. Back in 2020, on the heels of dropping that one-sided decision to Anthony Joshua, he was offered $4 or $5 million to box Dillian Whyte. He was being pursued by his PBC stablemate, Luis Ortiz, and he didn't jump right back in there with either of those two guys. He took his time, had a rebound fight with Chris Arreola. Deontay Wilder's rebounding with Robert Helenius, having suffered 2 back-to-back losses to Tyson Fury. He's not jumping right back in there with a killer. It's not the way these things usually happen. That's not the way these things are usually done. It's just not the way these things are done, and everybody knows that. It really is a wonder that this is even a conversation under these circumstances, that they're entertaining this offer at all. It really is a wonder. Tyson Fury saying, I have November 26th at Wembley or December 3rd at Principality. One is in 11 weeks and one is in 12 weeks. If a professional athlete who's shredded all year round can't get himself in shape in 3 months, there's a problem. It's the same fucking month. What's the problem? You're the problem. You're the one who proposed all of this. They're not at your mercy. They're not at your whim. Given the size and scale of this fight, especially in Britain, why should 1 or 2 weeks bother Tyson Fury? It's a wonder they're entertaining you at all. Let me fill you in on a little secret. What? Let me tell you something that's not so obvious. This is the biggest money fight out there for Tyson Fury. He can't make with someone else what he makes with Anthony Joshua. It goes without saying. And if Anthony Joshua walks, or you don't want to do this fight on the 17th, you don't want to make that concession, you won't make with anyone else what you could have made with him. You won't. Do you want to go head-to-head with this guy in December? Let me tell you something. If you don't fight this guy in December, if you don't share the ring with him, you'll go head-to-head against him in the month of December, because that's when they were talking about bringing him back. And what likely would be billed as a pay-per-view. If you don't fight him in December, who are you going to fight? Manuel Char? Agit Kabayel? How many pay-per-views are you going to sell off your name alone with those kinds of dance partners? Anthony can go in there with Zhilei Zhang. He can go in there with Filip Prgovic. Otto Wallin. And because he's on the rebound, those all make for interesting fights. Interesting situations that might tickle a boxing fan's fancy. But someone in your position, who's still an unbeaten fighter, still an unbeaten champion, how many people do you think want to pay to see you box somebody on the level of Emmanuel Char? Somebody on the level of an Agit Kabayel? You're supposed to be above that. Want to play these games online, argue with the very vocal minority. In truth, at the box office and at the gate, nobody wants to see Fury versus Char. So given what Tyson Fury wants to make every time he gets out there now, you have to bill his fights as pay-per-views. And if it's not Usyk, and it's not Anthony, who can you stick Tyson Fury in there with on pay-per-view that would actually sell? Fury versus Char, Joshua versus Wallin on the same night. Which fight sells better? Fury versus Char versus Joshua versus Zhilei Zhang. Same month. Which fight does better at the box office? Which fight does better at the gate? Underneath it all, you already know which fight involving which fighter would drum up more business. This is a smokescreen. Coming off of 2 consecutive losses, Anthony Joshua can still draw at the box office. He can still draw at the gate. That's why Tyson Fury is offering him this fight in the first place, because he's still a draw. And if he doesn't fight him in the ring, if you don't go head-to-head against him in the ring, you'll have to go head-to-head against him at the box office. And that's one battle that you won't win, because Fury versus Char, Fury versus Kabayel, Fury versus any of these other guys not named Usyk, not named Joshua, Fury versus anybody else ain't box office. It's the truth. And finally, in men's light heavyweight news, Dmitry Bivol expects Artur Beterbiev to be a more difficult opponent than Canelo Alvarez. Dmitry Bivol, whose base style is best described as living somewhere between a pure boxer and a boxer puncher. Canelo Alvarez, the Mexican star, has vowed to beat down Golovkin and then face Bivol in May of next year. But Bivol would rather pursue Beterbiev, who holds the WBO, IBF, and WBC titles. To be honest, I want to fight for the other belts. But if Canelo wants to fight against me again, then we can negotiate about it, and if everything is okay for me next fight, why not? But I am focused on Ramirez now. It is a really good opponent for me, and I have to beat him to create plans after the fight, Bivol said. According to Bivol's manager, Vadim Kornilov, his fighter is not contractually tied to a rematch clause with Canelo because both boxers went in different directions. We are not really trapped into a rematch clause anymore. This is the fight now against Ramirez, and the rematch will be renegotiated. Both guys went and took out a fight. Then we have to work together and figure out the next fight, Kornilov said. If the unification ever comes together, Bivol expects Beterbiev to be a tougher fight.
Naturally, because he's a naturally bigger guy than Canelo Alvarez with a much bigger punch.
A lot of people don't want to acknowledge that Dimitri Bivol being a bona fide light heavyweight and Canelo being a smaller fighter that moved up in weight, they don't want to acknowledge the role that had to play in the fight's overall aesthetic and why Canelo wasn't able to put a dent in Dimitri.
The same way he can put a dent in just about anybody at super middleweight, and it's because this wasn't a super middleweight he was fighting. This was a light heavyweight.
Where Canelo Alvarez can close the gap on a guy, pressure him, get a few shots in there, a few shots to the body, maybe one or two upstairs, chip away at a guy at super middleweight. It's a lot harder to do at light heavyweight because those are naturally bigger guys that are accustomed to taking a naturally bigger punch. So he wasn't able to do to Dimitri what he did to Callum Smith and what he did to Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant.
Artur Beterbiev is a different gravy.
Artur is arguably the strongest puncher in this entire division, this entire weight class. No one else seems to pack that same one-hitter-quitter power that he packs.
Artur Beterbiev doesn't struggle to put a dent in anybody at light heavyweight. He's got the size and power Canelo doesn't have at that weight.
He doesn't actually need to hit a guy but so many times before he puts a dent in him. And when it comes to a fight between Dimitri and Artur, Dimitri says, it will be difficult, but not much more. Just different type of difficult. The fight against Canelo was difficult because no one believed in me except my team. Beterbiev is not as popular as Canelo, so maybe that will be easier. But about boxing skills, about sizes, I think it will be more difficult, Bivol said.
Artur has the right physical dimensions, the right punching power, the right physical attributes for the job, and the right base style.
Some ways, so does Zurdo Ramirez, though I will say, Zurdo's not the puncher that Artur Beterbiev is. Zurdo doesn't have that one-hitter-quitter power. Even as a light heavyweight, he can break a guy down, but it's accumulating damage, accumulating punches.
He hasn't proven to be the same kind of puncher that Artur Beterbiev is, at least not yet. Maybe he'll surprise us in the Bivol fight.
As that is who Dimitri Bivol has to get through in order for this to even become a conversation. Though if he does, and he actually beats Zurdo Ramirez, retains his WBA title.
Is he going to actually be able to get Artur in the ring?
Bob doesn't want to send him over. He doesn't want to send him over to DAZN, even though a Dimitri Bivol undisputed light heavyweight title tilt would be the best bang for his buck fight he could be in. But Bob won't send him over.
He's supposed to be coming back against his mandatory challenger, Anthony Yarde. Most people think he can beat him.
Though even if he does, short of Dimitri crossing over to the Top Rank and ESPN side of things, it's hard to know whether or not this fight will happen.
It really is.